Hey, Elise, you have to unmute.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing good.
Me too.
So, Elise, I met Elise in about 2011 or 12. Was looking for a place to try floating. Somebody recommended it, and I showed up at Elise's house, just like that.
Of all places, of all people.
Yeah, that's part of our story here, right? I mean, think about of all the things that happen.
Put the cat drugs in.
Yeah,
Sometimes the cat's a saber-toothed tiger, and sometimes it's something else.
yeah. I don't think it's a saber-toothed tiger,
No, but
nor am I now.
I thought it might have chased you in here. You had a lot on your mind.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That is absolutely for sure. In in a lot of respects, when I look back at what brought me into your house, it's the most like impossible set of circumstances, and even one that like I don't know why I went in some respect from a logical point of view, although obviously there was more at work. At least that's how it seems to me.
There's there probably wasn't a lot of chance that I you would have crossed my path normally.
Yeah, that's probably
I
true.
mean, I was mostly centered in sure I didn't need a lawyer, a business lawyer at the time. I never heard of you before. I didn't know you when you walked in the door. We had different sets of friends, so
Yeah, you have
probabilities of you walking through my door for any reason that we can point at.
You had a float center at the time in your house,
Well, a boat center consisting of one tank.
one tank in your basement.
That was it.
But back 2010 or 11, when I met you, that was you were pretty much the only game in town in terms of place to float.
That's right. That's right. You came in 2011. The tank went in 2010.
Yeah. So for those out there, my name's Ken Kaplan. I'll be one of your hosts for the next however many series of podcast sessions where we're going to take a meandering stroll or a deep dive or a combination of both through the Office of Shaman. We have Elise Komisky, who owns a float center, lives in Chester, New Jersey. We have a whole bunch of attendees tonight. On the panelist facilitator side, we're lucky to have John Worthington, the author of The Office of Shaman, here. We've got Jenny Waters, who's behind the scenes, I think, working the slides today and answering your questions, which you can post on chat. We've got Vanessa Worthington, who manages Art of Floating, Paul Grinchy, and I think that probably sums it up.
And you missed someone.
Who did I miss then?
Ferris.
Ferris. Hello, Ferris. How are you? Welcome to Patio Chats, Ferris. I look forward to getting to know you. Look, this is, you can see Ralph came on, asked some questions. This is going to be a lot of fun, even more fun when you guys pipe up and ask some questions. So feel free to post them on chat. We're going to try to keep it so that not everybody's mic is on. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to hear each other. But hop on the chat box down. You can probably see where it is. Ask a question if you want. Jenny or Vanessa or someone will monitor your chat questions, and we may bring you on. I own a float center in Bedminster, New Jersey called Quantum Floats. It's been closed for a month. I'm really looking forward to getting it open again, and it'll open when it opens. I know that Vanessa's on, and she manages Art of Floating in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, and she's been closed for dating back to about the same time that I have. John Worthington's on. He comes all the way. He's all the way out in Puerto Vallarta. I don't think they're under as many restrictions as we are here, so they may still have some floaters coming by their center. I also have a law practice in Morristown, New Jersey. I'm a corporate lawyer, so I do a variety of things, and I very much use these concepts and tools we're going to talk about over the next however many days in my law practice and in just getting along. And that is kind of the beauty behind it. When I met Elise, I floated a few times. I don't even know how many times before she handed me a copy, or I bought a copy of the Office of Shaman. I was already looking for what the heck goes on and how do I understand the stuff that's showing up in my life. And I had I've been a corporate lawyer for 30 years in terms of seeing patterns show up of things I was doing. That was readily apparent for me. The same kinds of issues kept popping up again, and that's true for everybody. We bounce up against those same limitations, self-imposed limitations in our thinking over and over and over again, unless and until we take a look at them and say, that one I'm not okay with. I was listening to a podcast earlier today from Jordan Peterson, and who talks about some of the same concepts. That basically Peterson was saying that we have these blind spots in our thinking. Peterson said, and they're there for lots of us. They stay there throughout our whole life. They tend to be, let's call them kind of the bigger issues in us getting along. And the reason why they happen to be the bigger issues, Peterson said, is because all the smaller ones, let's call them the easier ones, we've dealt with. These ones that are the bigger blind spots happen to be kind of persnickety, doggedy, prickly kind of issues that we tend not to want to look at. Hence why we get to our mature age or adulthood, and in my case, nearly 40 years old, before I was like, I got to do something about this. And enter stage left, Elise Comiskey, who introduced me to the Office of Shaman. I sat and read it in my living room in this house, must have been about 10 years ago. And I remember just thinking to myself, whoa, yes, absolutely. I can't, it connected for me a lot of things I had been thinking about, or maybe they were kind of nagging on me and I didn't understand what they were, like this whole concept of neural programming. I knew a little bit about it, but not much. And that's just one of the tools that's introduced in the Office of Shaman. And then John Worthington connects those tools with functions, parts of us, the part of us that's more than the body. And so the Office of Shaman is a practical ride, a practical tool book through opening up your thinking so that you can get out of your own way, so that you could relieve stress, so that you could set and achieve goals, so that you could become more aware, so you can close and fill up some of those blind spots that you might have recognized already or might not have recognized. So let's go then. I guess I want to start, even though I didn't ask him about this, by bringing on John. John, can you come on? I just want to ask you why you wrote the book. What inspired you to do that, or like what was going on for you that you decided to write the Office of Shaman?
Well, there were three factors really. One of them was that I had, the book had been running around in my mind for a while, actually, and I just couldn't get it anywhere else. It was just running around in my head. And I was talking to a lady that there was an editor of a little local paper in Ajijic, Mexico, and I wrote 2 or 3 columns for them on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, whatever the heck it was. There was a lot of columns, I can tell you that part. But anyway, the thing is that I kept having this book go around in my head, saying, I got to sit down and write this out. I got to sit down and write this out. And then I went to see my sister, and I had talked to her about some things that was on my mind. And the thing is that at the end of of everything, some 10 years later, her ex got a hold of me and said, "Why don't you write that book down?" He says, "I'm writing books, or I'm editing books." And he impressed me and everything. I mean, I was really impressed. He did a good job. And the thing is that, well, I started writing the thing, and it was there already. And so I just started going with it. And he'd call me up and say, "Okay, what is it that you're doing here? Are you sure about this?" And we'd have these long discussions about ideas and all those kinds of things. And I'd say, "Yeah, I actually do know what I'm talking about with this." And he'd say, "Okay, well, give me your proof." And I'd tell him where to go find it. And he'd say, "Okay, damn it." And then we'd have some more discussion and so forth. And it went like that for a while until we got it written. And then he said, "Well, I got to see how this is going to fly," which made pretty good sense to me. So he sent it out to a bunch of people. And Elise was one of those people that he sent it out to. I didn't know who Elise was. I wouldn't have known Elise from Adam's Off Dog at that time. But anyway, Paul told me that these were people that he knew that from some endeavor he'd been involved in. And I said, "Well, okay, that sounds like a reasonable assumption to me." And so he edited the book, and I wrote it, and now you're reading it. So
Yeah. Well, a farmer from where? Sullivan County, Pennsylvania?
yeah, farming would probably be a step up. It's more hunter gathering actually at that stage of farming.
Okay.
We ate a lot of deer and squirrel and grouse and
Not
there's berries and stuff.
not exactly the image that I think when I first met you, or before I met you, that gets conjured up when I pick up a book called The Office of Shaman.
Yeah, well, that's your problem.
um, but the office part is, I take it because, these concepts are accessible to everyone. They're a feature of how we think.
Well, you have to think about it like this: is that there has been a place in society, kind of like there's the office of president, okay, but there's the office of doctor of medicine, or there's the officer of police captain, or there's the office, I mean, it's not necessarily a physical place or even necessarily a physical entity. It's an idea that exists in society itself, and that's the reason it was called that.
Yeah.
It's a slot in society, like banking is a slot in society,
Yeah.
like being a taxi driver is a slot in society.
It's not one for me growing up that I had heard much, if anything, about. I don't even know that I came across the term of what it was until I was much older.
Me either. I thought that when I was growing up, I thought that shamanism was probably some type of method. It would probably have been part of the United Evangelical Brethren offshoot of Protestantism or something, as far as I would have known growing up. I had no idea at all. None.
How did you get introduced to it? Did you, was it research?
Well, no, not really. It was yes, yeah, and no. Um, what in today's Huffington Post, there's an article about indigenous people suing a missionary group in Brazil. Uh, I knew that missionary group back in the day before it was politically motivated or before it was right wing. In fact, the majority of that missionary group came to my house to have Sunday dinner. And so I got to know a lot of people that were involved with the beginning of that group. Some people had a number of lives on their heads or on their minds or on their backs that they had to carry and get things done with. Some people had lost other people to indigenous tribes. I mean, it was a strong endeavor. People had to believe pretty strongly in the thing, which was one of the reasons why I could understand what things like programming were really trying to say to us as humans, because of what I saw those people do. I just think that there are other descriptions besides blaming it on Jesus. I mean, I think that Jesus is fine. I just don't think that's the only place that, I don't think that faith can only be defined in that way. I think that faith may be able to be defined in a number of ways. And it may have different results depending on how it's defined. But then I find that to be true with a number of things that we take for granted as not things that we really have or practice, because we simply don't know how to define them.
It sounds like from what you just said that you paid attention or were not so swayed by taking an event or what was going on for people or whatever it is and placing it on the outside without first investigating whether it was a part of thinking that someone generated or a reality they created.
Well, let me see if I can explain it like this. You know, if it's you and Dad on the farm, and you know you're trying to catch up from where Granddad built the farm himself, and you're trying to bring that up into the modern era, there's a lot of work that's involved, and you have to figure out the most efficient way to get that done, which means you have to consider it. You have to think about it. In other words, you have to think about, well, how do I get this thing to work this way? Do I have to alter the landscape? Do I have to, when do I have to plant this? Do I have to harvest it? How can I store it? And if I can't store it there, then how else can I do it? You're always looking for alternative ways to get things done, and the most efficient way that you can do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, I grew up in that type of thought processes. And so when I went to start looking into religious and theological thinking, there were certain parts of it that I thought was just fascinating, like semantics and hermeneutics and that kind of stuff, because I could see how they were tools and how they were used and how people had used them. I said, well, they don't have to be limited to those uses, do they? And so I started looking for other ways to use them. And so the thing is that I found it fascinating that the people in church, in all manner of churches, were talking about the same kinds of things that the people in, for instance, Silva, mind control, and the early EST trainings and so forth. They were all talking about very much the same things, but using different languages to point at those same things. And it's like, I'm sitting there with, reading Krasipsky and Mumford and people like that, and looking at this, at Barbara Brown and so on, and looking at this thing saying, you guys can, if you read this, if you took out that word and you put this word in, it makes the same sense. And so they would say, well, no, hey, and so I wasn't really invited back a lot. I didn't blame them because Ken, I don't clean up good.
Nor do you want to clean up.
No, I don't. You're right. I don't.
Yeah.
You're right. So anyway, that's the story. And so when Paul wrote me and he said, or he got a hold of me, he said, would you write the book? I said, sure. It took me about 3 months.
Okay. And you started it with a description or a little bit of a history of the early shamans, and they
Yeah,
were a pretty
I,
seclusionary bunch.
okay. I had been curious about that after I had begun to see what what the church and what these new guys were talking, these new neuro linguistic programming types were talking about. Okay, and I started saying, okay, wait a second here. Everybody's been talking about this for years. Okay, I mean millennia. Okay, this has been around. This is not anything new. You know, I'm not seeing it for the first time. No one's seeing it for the first time. It's just that we have a language called computer language, programming language, that we can define it. It's been around. It's not a mystery or anything. Everybody's talked about it. Oh, ooh, it's a mystery. No, it's not. It's not a mystery. It's something we all do all the time. What the hell? You don't have to have a special relationship with your priest or with God or anything else to get that done. You don't have to go through, I don't know, any of the kinds of rituals that people go through. You can just do it yourself. That's okay. God's busy. He won't mind. He'll say, "Oh, thanks. I was getting around to you, but you beat me to it. Ah, man, thanks. You don't mind if I just rest here for a second, do you? I'm busy. You know that." And everybody will have it. They'll think that's fine. So when I got to looking at that stuff, and I started looking at really some of the literature that depicts early history, and even going back and reading the archaeological accounts of what the priests thought they saw, as opposed to what the indigenous peoples reported that the priest saw, were oftentimes at such odds that it was like, oh, okay, the priest never did see this, or the priest did see this, but these other guys were defining it differently, and the priests were ticked off, and so they wanted to shut those guys up. Apparently, oh, I see. Well, they shut them up, anyway, didn't they?
Yeah.
And so it went like that, and there were things like from Eastern philosophies and so forth that were pointing in the same directions. And so I said, okay, wait a second. I don't want to go through all this stuff. How about if I just stop and say, okay, look, what if we can reduce this down to a way to talk about this that is apolitical, a-religious, asocial, a-dichotometric, and just talk about it as a human thing. I don't want to tell anybody the frickin' how to do it. This is not a do-it-yourself book. If you got to do it yourself, I can't tell you how to do that. Only you do. You wrote it. I didn't. But I can slow you down enough maybe to get you to observe it. And if I could do that, well, then a good thing. And otherwise, have a good time with the Bob story. I'm not trying to convince anybody anything. So there, that's my story, and I'm sticking
All
to it.
right. So what roles did the shamans play, and what have they always played? What are they, and
Well, go back and think about this. If you lived in Europe back in the day, I mean, we're talking about, let's say 6 to 12,000 years ago. Okay, right after the Ice Age and before anything much started happening in terms of towns and cities and so forth. And there were people that, you had to live where you had to live. You had to do what you had to do, and people had to learn about plants, and they had to learn about what animals did, and they had to learn about how to hunt the animals, and there was a lot of stuff they had to do. They had to hunt big animals and harvest the big animal and so forth. There were lots of parts to it, and so not everybody could go running out there on the vast steppe and kill woolly rhinoceroses and so forth. Okay, some guys we don't want them out there. It's like the guys. Some guys never get picked for basketball. They don't get picked. It's the same thing. Okay, and so what do you have them do? You say, stay here and find out. Why don't you see how we can do this better? You're good at that. Don't bows and arrows. No spears. No, you don't do that. Okay, good. Afterwards, you can come cook. Okay, that there had to be that guy, right? It had to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've worked with that guy over and over and
Yep.
over. I know that that guy exists in every work crew. It's a law in the universe,
Yeah.
okay? Okay, and these were essentially big work crews that got along pretty good together, I guess, okay? The tribes in those days. And so, you know, who was it that you went to when everything went bad? There's always that guy in the dorm that you go to and you talk to, isn't there? There's always that guy at the coffee shop that you say, oh, hey, George, how you doing? Oh, you'll say George. Jesus. Javier, how you doing? You know, that guy that you always go talk to, right? And it's like, I mean, he's always there. And when you go talk to him, he's like, yeah. Well, you know, my aunt Mildred, she had that thing. You know, what they did was they did this, and you know, I think if you go over there and you talk to so and so that such and such, that'll happen. There's always that guy around, right? He knows everything. He knows everybody. Okay, he might sell real estate. He might just be a hustler. He might play pool. You don't know what the hell the guy's going to do, but he's always there, right? And he's always available in every office, in every pool hall, everywhere you ever go. There's always that guy around.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
That's the guy that they made the shaman. He can't do nothing else.
Yeah.
You know, he's the guy that knows all of the gossip. Yeah.
Head gossip person.
Yeah, that's it. Big gossip guy.
Yeah. But
No, he better be able to keep his mouth shut most of the time, though. Okay.
yeah, problem solver.
Yeah, that kind of thing. You know what we did the last 3 generations? This is what I heard anyway. When
Yeah.
I was this is how they solved this when that happened before.
Yep. Like a repository of what collectively they think about things.
It's the current lament that the younger people on the reservation are having about losing their elders to the coronavirus. They're losing their identity.
Oh, you're like making drawing an analogy to some of the recent.
Yeah, that's actually happening now. I think it was on NBC News last night, if I'm not mistaken.
With some of the states protesting?
No. On the reservations, okay, on the reservations, like for instance, in the Navajo reservation, the per capita infection rate is rampant. It's enormous, okay? And the lament is the people who are dying, of course, are the elders.
Mm. Yeah.
And they're losing the memory for an entire generation.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be a concern.
That's who those guys are.
Okay. Well, from reading one of the early chapters, it sounds like there was that, you know, shamans been around for as long as people have been around, pretty much.
There's always older people, right? And they
Yeah.
that know all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, priests called them shamans or whatever they call them. I don't think they called themselves that. I think they said, you know, I'll tell you what, I'm an old dude and I've done this about 47 times. I don't want to listen to your crap, Sonny. Sit your butt down and listen. Call me a shaman, okay? There you go.
Yeah. And then some power trip or some, you know, struggle between that kind of person existing in society and the advent of the church or organized religion.
Well, you know, there's always guys that are coming along that are saying, okay, you know, I want me some of that spiritual thing. You know, it's like this. It's like, remember that song about that's the way you do it? You know, got to sell them refrigerators on MTA.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get you guitar and
that's the one. Okay. Those kids are always around, right? I mean, they're always there. They're kids that do that. Okay, they grow up and sometimes they get older and become boomers, and sometimes it sticks with them forever. But there are kids that are always trying to accomplish those kinds of things, and so those kids, if they get a chance, they're power hungry like everybody else, of course, right?
Yeah.
And so they aligned with the rulers and said, you know, I can do magic things for you. I mean, why wouldn't they? I mean, that's the logical sequence of how that would come together. That's all. I mean,
Yeah.
so you still see that progression in a company right now. You still see that same
Yeah.
progression. You know, yeah.
Yeah. I can see at least it seems to me the way you just said it, how go back in years, especially go back a lot of years, and the things that people who were more sophisticated with their thinking could do must have looked quite magical to those that couldn't do it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you got guys that are saying, "Hey, look, I got eagle feathers in my own hand right here. Look, see that? I went and got that myself.
Yeah.
I won. Look at that. I got his feathers." Yeah, that's not really. I mean, it's romantic and everything, but it's not really all that much of a mental challenge.
Yeah.
You got to be quick, but and you got to think about it, no doubt. But they told you how to do it. If you follow the instructions, you got it done. What the hell?
Yeah. Well, I come out of the corporate law world where, in some firms that they call blue chip firms with people who have, these fancy degrees. And then I ran into you one day and saw what you can do in terms of analyzing thought and watching what people do, and
Yeah.
it looked like a whole skill set like I had never come across. I was fairly intrigued with it, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, I can explain to you how I do it. I don't. Most people don't keep telling me I can't when I'm explaining it to them and doing it. Most of the time, they tell me I can't do what I'm doing at that very moment.
That's an interesting thing you just said.
Yeah.
That but I think I get that. I mean, I don't know whether they say you can't, like you have no right, or you can't, like.
They say that cannot be done.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it, and they're saying, "No, it can't be done. Nope, I don't believe in that shit." Okay. Me either. I don't believe in that shit. Not the
Yeah.
way you think about it, but there you
Yeah.
go.
But yet, like the way that you lay out the book, I describe it as sometimes as just a language book. And to hear you talk about it earlier about how you were seeing how religious organizations describe things and how Sylvan mind control described them, they were pointing at the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the reason for the two storylines.
Okay, the two meaning you have part of the book follows this dialogue with Bob, and another part of it is more of here's the authority behind it part.
Well, no, the other one's the religiously stated lie.
Okay. Yeah, help me more with that, because I didn't. Yeah.
Okay. Look, the thing is that you have to understand how programming works to understand what's going on there, right?
Okay. Yep.
Do you think it's an accident when you go into the church that there is a tone of voice that all churches have? The guy that runs the service, all churches have the same tone of voice. You think that's an accident?
I'd never thought about that until you just said it. I'm going to answer it. No, I do not think at all it's an accident.
It's
I think
practice art, trust me.
Yeah.
Voice has got to fill that space up and ring just right. So it's cool. It's like these guys have got their voice thing down. So when they sing and so forth, they know what the hell they're doing. Trust me on this one. I don't know anything about it. Would never do such a thing.
Interesting. Yeah. No.
I observed it. Is all. That's it.
Yeah. You just observed.
That's all. Well, the thing is that we all do that stuff all of the time, and when we want to make a point, we have a religious reasoning that we use. Sometimes we use it to prove our rightness and wrongness, or our righteousness, or how it is we've been wronged, or how it is that we've gotten a raw deal. You even talk about the guy that goes out to the bar. He's always right about that. It's a religious statement that he makes. You can't argue with it. So you can't stop the guy and say, "Hey, that's a lie." I mean, if you did, he'd be in a fight right then. That would. I can't look at that. Bam, 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 bam. Why you make me look at that for? So you can't tell him that. That's a
Yeah.
religious statement, right? So the thing is that if you make those statements and you make them logically so that they make historically logical sense, and you make the statement when you're well, say when you're generating a very deep brainwave frequency in the word processes or the word um, formations and sentence structures and semantics and so forth, then what happens is that you deliver the message deep into the brain.
Say that last part again about the message.
You deliver the message deep into the brain.
Yeah, deep into the
Yeah,
brain. Yeah.
yeah. So if you think about it, there's a rhythm to the wording, right? Forgiveness freed up thinking space in the brain that had previously been taken up by guilt or fear. Da 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 da.
Mm. Well, space in the thinking machinery freed up the brain to deal with ever more complex abstractions.
Yeah.
This ties into what we said before about language.
Yeah.
It it's not a I mean, it is in some sense an academic pursuit, but this is language ties into how we influence our other people or in groups or reach
Well,
agreements or talk to ourselves. And,
well, we don't want to get ahead of the story, I guess, but
you know,
here's the thing is that language is something that we use to communicate, but it isn't necessarily the words.
yeah,
Well, the words are important, but that's not the communication,
yeah, yeah, makes sense.
does it?
It does.
But I bet
So they
I bet there are people that don't think that makes sense.
well, we could ask, and so feel free to ask some questions there. Anybody want to jump in here and see who we got? How about you, Ralph, or Patrick, or Pam?
I mean, I definitely like to comment on the religious thing, only because of my background of going to church, going to a regular church, going to Christian church, and seeing that there is a power. Because again, I don't know if the church is selling it as if you believe in God, or is it really you believe in yourself? But at the same time, people go there with problems, and they're able to resolve problems, and something overcomes people to get their lives back in order. And that's why I'm seeing like the connection with what John is talking about. Somehow, you know what I'm saying? Is it God that solved your problem, or did you just solve your problem?
Yeah, that slide before about forgiveness and what the church offered. Was a pretty powerful, world-changing concept, right? You didn't have to look behind your back anymore that someone was going to throw a spear at you or shoot you. You'd
Yeah,
go in
but in a
there and
weird,
be forgiven and free up a whole bunch of circuitry.
you confess, right? You talk about it, you free up your circuitry, and that's it. You move on. It's like that. Then you have more space to do other things. Concentrate on whatever the next task is.
Yeah,
So I can see like the connection with a religious view, and I don't know if you guys want to talk about the spirit, but somehow I think we're talking to our spirit, whether it be in church or whether it be the way John is describing in the book. Are we talking to ourselves? Are we talking to our spirit? Because at
Well,
the end of the day,
Ralph, let's do it like this so that people can have a way to look at this.
yeah,
Okay? How about this? Right now that you and I are talking to each other over our respective computer screens, whether you're on a screen or whether you're just listening, but we're talking across two computers, and we have there are things that are at play here, exactly the same as there is in our own brains and beings, if you will. Okay. For instance, what we're seeing, what you and I are seeing, is right now Kenneth on the screen, or maybe me on the screen. I don't know. And what's going on is that the computer is demonstrating or showing the picture of Ken, but the computer is not thinking about the picture of Ken. The computer is thinking about lighting up pixels, and the computer is thinking of what program is running, and the computer is thinking about whether or not it's keeping a connection with the voice over internet protocols. The computer is thinking about whether there are viruses coming in and out of it at the moment. The computer is thinking about all the other connections it has to make and maintain in order to continue to speak, including the connection with the cloud, whatever the hell that is. That's what the computer is thinking about. It's also thinking about which programs are actually being used. For instance, I can see that there's graphics and data processing and photography going on. There's all kinds of different things going on at the same time here on this very app, this one app alone. Which means that somewhere deep in the bowels of the computer, in the operating system, all of this can be connected and intertwined so that it works the way it's working in front of us right now at this moment. But the computer has no damned idea that I'm sitting here or that you're sitting there. But we're talking to each other, and we're the ones that they're communicating. Now, the computer doesn't know that. Now, the thing is that our brains and our bodies are the computer. Now, what is it that we're talking with? I don't care how you define that. I don't care what you call it. I don't care whether you call it a standing wave around your body. I don't care whether you call it a magnetic force. I don't care whether you call it spiritual. I don't care if you call it a religious frickin' experience. I don't really care if you call it, no, I would care if you call it George. I don't care if you call it Harry, though, okay? You know, it can be anything you want. You could even call it Aunt Matilda if you'd like. I don't care. But it's there. And we all use it all of the damn time. Or rather, perhaps it uses us. It depends on your point of view or where you want to observe it from. To me, it's easier to have a bridge or a whole roadway system that allows me to go to express the alma or the soul through the body. If I think about it in that fashion, then I have lots more thought processes available to use. Ken says that he likes that.
Yeah.
Me too. I like that. It works better than not having them. I started off with not having any thought processes, and I've done fairly well in the terms of thought processes, at least. So I'm sorry. Ken, go on ahead.
Oh, that, yeah. Ralph, did that answer your question?
It did. Something else that I find fascinating is like how he's talking about the computer and how our mind is like the computer. Like that's something else that, you know, like human invented a computer. So I know how it works. It's probably like our minds work. And trying to put together the logic that John talks about and wrapping it in this modern world of how a computer works, how our brain works. Like he's made some really good analogies the past, I don't know, it's been 30, 40 days we've been talking. But I really believe that those connections via the computer systems, that's how our brain works. That's, you know, it's that simple.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That was probably a big account for me being interested, because it was in an understandable language that allowed me to make sense of things that were going on that I observed in my own thinking or even in other people's. And in other words, take it out of, you know, a lot of the books that I had read it wasn't connecting for me. You know, there wasn't an accurate language. If you don't have an accurate language, then, I encountered things like, connect to the source, or, manifest it, wake up in the morning and manifest that thing, which, I was never particularly good at manifesting anything deliberately like that. But I come to see that having a language is important to get along in whatever I do, especially one that's accurate, like a computer language. Remember, we had talked previously, the language is never the thing. The word's not the thing. There's nothing sacrosanct about, I don't think, I got John on the look staring at me now as I say this, but there's really nothing sacrosanct about what he says. It just happens to be accurate. Accuracy counts.
Look, if it isn't real, don't use it. If it is, well, okay, great. I'm not trying to convince anybody about reality. It's like, okay, look, I'm telling you, this is a thought process that I use to get the hell out of all that religious mumbo jumbo crap and be able to take advantage of those concepts that they're talking about without all the baggage that went with it. If you like that, super, use it. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. It's okay. I don't mind. I'm not going to try to change your mind.
That's good.
Yeah, like I think it could work in addition, without or with, exactly that type of thought.
Say more about that. I'm not sure.
So it's like, all right, if somebody's into religion and that's what kind of gives them peace, and I think that if you can kind of acknowledge what John is kind of talking about, once you kind of get that moment, that you understand it a little bit, then you could even take it, into your religious mode. That, hey man, if you're in a setting to where you're kind of concentrating on yourself, that's a good thing. You know what I mean? If you're trying to figure things out for yourself and you're in that mode where the voice is right and all this is right, and I know it's a business, and in business they need participation, but at the same time it gives you a place and a time. Like, look, we've been talking every night at 7, and I'm sure it helps a lot of people that whoever's come on, it helped me figure something about my memory. I'm sure George and the other guy Jesse, it helped them figure out some stuff. Church kind of does that for somebody on a weekly basis. Every week at this time, come here and be hypnotized a little bit. And
that's the nature of that beast. It is.
It is. But at the same time, you're kind of getting in touch with your inner. What you're saying is, who you're talking to. Is it God? Is it your soul? Is it yourself?
Well, let's just say it like this, Ralph. I don't really give a damn.
Yeah.
The thing is that if I can have a platform to see what I'm thinking about, and I can see what that thinking does, that's just a great thing there, from my perspective, for me, because what it does is it allows me to think about these concepts and these ideas in such a way as to say, okay, I can go from where I am. I don't care whether this is true or not. I'm going to deal with it as though it might be true. Just that. And if I did that, that gives me a bridge from where I am right now to this other place over here that I've never looked at before. So I'm going to go over this bridge that could be there. Okay. I mean, what's the harm? I'm stuck where I am. So if I go over this bridge, it could be here, and I find out that it's really there, and there's something on the other side of it. Now where am I? Now I'm in a different place. Is that a better place or a different or a worse place? I don't know. But now I know that there's a bridge. If there's one bridge, there's got to be more. I'm just an eternal optimist. Show me a pile of horse shit, and I'm sure there's got to be a pony somewhere. So, I go looking.
That's the fact.
Yeah, and like the complexity of our brains, again, like how emotions are like apps. Like you were discussing. You were talking about how I don't know. I guess you could say it better, John. But
look here. I'll do it for you. Okay, here we go. Jenny's been wanting me to do this. I can guarantee you that she's been wanting me to do this for about a month now. Here we go.
I know. Yep.
Okay, look. Think about it like this. You get a phone call, right? Now, I'm going to answer the phone call. I want you to tell me what the frickin' story is about, okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. What? Yeah. 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 yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah. Click. Number of stories, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's not the word; it's the emotion that carries the meaning. And the emotion is very, very much in this story illustration, in the illustration. It's very, very much like what kind of meta program, what kind of is this a word processing program that I'm using? Is this in other words, what color is that entire program that I'm using that colors that word at that moment?
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different way of thinking about language, isn't it? It's not about defining the word, because the word all by itself may not have any meaning whatsoever. I've got a word that this is Ken's favorite word of the year. Fabulous.
Fabulous. Yeah.
It has absolutely no meaning.
Yeah.
None. Who knows what that is?
Yeah.
How big is it, etc. So I'm pretty careful about trying to say things in a way that it can only mean that one thing. Sometimes.
Yeah, you're pretty careful. And I've become pretty careful too. I'm going to say something, well, saying it with care is about as good a way as you can to make sure that it gets heard on the receiving end.
Yeah, and all right, like if I can comment on that, because we've been talking about mental, but at the same time with this thought process, if you're connecting, if it's like at a corporate level, connecting with employees, connecting with employers, whatever it is, there's a communication, there's a connection with communicating this way and thinking this way that I don't know, it just gets you over the hump more.
Yeah, you're right. It does.
Yeah.
You'd be right.
Okay. Well, any other questions out there?
Uh-oh, it sounds like Ken's going to go home.
No, see, yes, he was here. I mean, I wanted to ask, what's to like, why should I know if I ask this question, like, why should somebody pick up this book? And maybe the answer is, well, they're already here. Too late for that. You're here. Why are you doing here? But I think what we have in store is, we're going to go take as long as it takes to get through this. We'll go through the first part of the book, which is about tools as in things you can pick up and use if you want to, or not if you don't want to. And then the second part of the book connects those tools with what John calls functions, which are the ways to think about, a language to think about how that other part of us, call it whatever you want, a soul, the other, who cares what you call it, expresses through the body. And why would anyone care about this? I don't know. I can only tell you for me, I find it very handy and practical in every aspect of my life because language counts, and it's been made a difference for me in getting along with what I'm going to do, but what I do, but you'll either pick it up and find it out for yourself or not. What else? Elise, you have anything to add here?
Let's see. I don't know. We talked about a lot of things, and I think some of it just kind of settled into your mind. I think there's a lot more even in the intro that we could talk about. Maybe we can pick up that because there's a couple of ideas that we really didn't talk about.
Okay. It fades in and out a little bit. I'm not sure if that's just on my end that you got a little squeaky there. But I think what you said is that there's a lot packed in this.
Oh, well, there's not anything in this book that isn't just densely packed with new ideas that are uh, already in our thinking, but maybe we haven't really looked at them yet. So even I don't want to rush on to the next set when maybe there's a little bit more to be done here.
Okay.
And we have one more question here. When introducing someone to the Office of Shaman and the book, would also adding floating be a necessity rather than a bonus?
Necessity rather than a bonus. I think there's that slowing down has a lot to do with learning these concepts, because as we'll get on in this discussions over the next however many days and weeks, especially in maybe hit it tomorrow and the next day, we'll talk about what John was talking about, that like the operating system part of the computer. Well, there's a aspect of thinking or aspects of thinking that are slower than others. Consciousness is generally a fast pace. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? But at the deeper operating system levels, things are slower, and floating definitely does facilitate access to that level of the computer. But floating would be a thing, not a necessary thing, but a damn handy tool as far as I'm concerned to access those deeper parts of awareness. So I wouldn't say that floating is a must, but I also haven't encountered anything that's more effective in getting my thoughts down to that place of awareness.
When I first read the book, floating wasn't available to me.
Yeah.
But the book was still doing its job. The cadence and rhythms in the book and the way the sentences are structured, we're still working on the slower brain waves in my brain and in my mind. So it's not necessary to float. It's lovely if you can also do that, but it's not necessary for reading the book. That's the way I see it.
Okay. And we'll have our float centers open soon, I hope. Any other questions? So how about with that then, we'll tomorrow I think we'll introduce Bob, Elise, is that right? We're going to introduce Bob tomorrow?
Yeah, he's a good character. I feel that all of us have a little bit of Bob in us, and he has a lot to learn. Let's put it that way, and he does learn, which is wonderful.
I remember when I started reading the book, you gave me a phone call, and I remember this distinctly. You said, does that Bob remind you of anything, of anybody? I think I said, and what are you implying there, Elise?
Because you knew very well what I was talking about.
Sure did, yeah. I think, as Ralph may have said a couple of patio chats ago, we've all got a Bob, a bit of Bob in us. Our times are 8 p.m. We were doing it at 7 p.m., so we're going to keep this going at 8 p.m. So we'll see everybody tomorrow night at 8 p.m., where we'll keep the discussion going.
Good night, guys.
Right. Sound good?
Sounds good. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow.